First, thank you for your time in coming today. We want to hear about what the Senate's doing and specifically about the caucus that you and Senator Blumenthal have established. You're using legislation to tackle here, as I said, an egregious human rights violation, trafficking in persons. Tell us about it. You have a group of activists here that covers the entire United States.
Well, thank you, Paula. First, thanks for your leadership on this. Paula and I have worked together over the years, and here he comes, Mr. Blumenthal.
Okay.
Senator Blumenthal, Connecticut.
This is Marilyn, Carlson.
I was just going to make excuses for his absence. Here he is. And we appreciate Marilyn being here with us. You know, the approval rating for senators is now less than 10%. So Marilyn's taking quite a risk to be seen on stage. Richard and I just had anybody wants to see us, so thank you. We may be here all afternoon.
I was just, may I?
Yes, sorry.
Senator, I was just posing the question about your both coming together and establishing a caucus, how you used it to actually put forth legislation and to combat trafficking. And this group here, the World Affairs Councils of America, we cover 40 councils over the entire United States. We'd like to hear what you're doing and also be thinking in mind how we can be assisting in this effort. So, over to both of you. And welcome.
Well, also, thanks to the World Affairs Councils all over the country. And I know there's some folks here from Ohio. We saw Patrick already. Wait. Okay, good. Columbus chapter.
I hope they're an equal number from Connecticut.
Where's Connecticut? Waiting here. But it's a great organization. I'm sure it's with Richard, but I've had the opportunity to speak to the World Affairs Council many times over the years, putting my hometown in Cincinnati because of the work I've done on trade and other issues and that have an international impact in Cincinnati and in our state. But this is one that really cuts across all lines. I mean, it cuts across partisan lines and regional lines. It's not international. What Richard and I have learned in this process is that although probably both of us got involved initially because of hearing about some of these horrible stories internationally in developing countries. It's a problem right here in Toledo, Ohio. For instance, we have a lot of arrests, prosecutions that relate to child trafficking. We just happen to be, unfortunately, on some sort of an avenue of trafficking. In fact, Toledo is now number 4 in the country. That's not where you want to be. And so I've gotten involved partly because of the intense interest in Ohio on this issue, as well as the international issues. And working with Richard, we did establish a caucus a year ago. It gives all senators a chance to come together and talk about this issue, to raise awareness. We have hearings, we have briefings once a month. We tend to do something. Some of you in this room have been helpful, probably, some of the experts in coming in and briefing us on what's going on globally and in our states. We have also been able to work on some legislation. This effort spawned some legislative activity. So Richard and I came together, Republican and Democrat, and co-sponsored a bill that focused on contracting. And I'm on the Government Affairs Committee, and that is an issue that both Richard and I wanted to focus on because this is taxpayer money going to U.S. contractors who then engage in a practice that is really human trafficking. Sometimes it's taking away passports, and sometimes it's indentured labor, sometimes it's getting people to come to, say, Afghanistan or Iraq to provide services to our troops and to us as taxpayers ultimately, and mistreating those people in ways that is really trafficking in human beings. And so we wanted to put in place, and Paula probably worked on this in the State Department, additional transparency, additional requirements, and so on, so that these contractors, who aren't U.S. companies typically, would be subject to the same rules as if they were a U.S. company, a U.S. contractor. We think that's going to be effective, and we're pleased to see that legislation move. Now we've got additional legislation, the Child Sex Trafficking Act. On the Finance Committee also, this is an issue that's significant in terms of the child welfare system, and Richard can explain this better than I can, because he is a former prosecutor. But the bottom line of this bill, as I see it, I am a recovering lawyer too, but I wasn't a prosecutor. But the bottom line, as I see it, is really to change the attitude for these welfare systems not to view these sex trafficked children as criminals, rather view them as victims and get them the services they need. And there's some very disturbing examples of this in my home state. I know Connecticut, and Richard maybe can talk in more detail about it, where they take a child who is involved in sex trafficking and essentially create a criminal mindset by putting them in the criminal system, as opposed to taking them away from whatever the family, or often it's not a family situation, that is exploiting them, give them the help that they need, get them through sometimes mental health counseling and so on, get them back on their feet so that they can at age 16, 17, become more productive citizens rather than going into the criminal justice system where they tend to just kick in and out of the justice system. So it's changing the attitude about sex trafficking among minors. That legislation, I think, is going to be able to be passed on a bipartisan basis in the Senate. And there's a lot of support from the Finance Committee. Senator Wyden is one of our strong supporters. And we're hopeful that that gets through the House also gets signed along by the President. So those are a couple of examples of legislative initiatives. But more important to me, really, is just to raise the awareness of the issue, which you're doing now all over the country. And I appreciate the fact that you're doing it, because that is ultimately the most successful way to get legislators to do the right thing. It's all about having it bubble up from the grassroots. So thank you for being here today. It sounds like you've had a great agenda and you've learned a lot, and I know you'll take that home and help to increase that awareness and therefore increase our opportunities and changes in the law that help protect these children and help to stop this horrific practice of human trafficking.
Thank you, Senator Portman. Senator Blumenthal, please.
Thank you.
Let's share
Thank
your
you.
perspective.
I want to join in thanking the World Affairs Council for focusing on this issue, which is one of the most pernicious and insidious threats to children, women, particularly all around the world, including in the United States. And I want to thank Rob Portman for his leadership. He's one of the most thoughtful and insightful people in the Senate. I know that may seem like a low standard sometimes, but he has really been an extraordinary leader in these areas, and so many others. And I think awareness is critical, but I think another larger lesson here is that bipartisan things are happening in the Senate. And this progress that we're making is simply one example. The End Human Trafficking in Government contracting, which we added to the National Defense Authorization Bill as an amendment. We sponsored it first in the bill, we then added it as an amendment, had strong bipartisan support. Basically, it not only protects workers abroad, but also levels the playing field. When you think about it, I know we have some business people here. Somebody who employs a worker under substandard conditions at less than certain wages, exploiting them, deceiving them in order to come to work in the first place, then taking their passports or other papers so they are in effect condemned to slavery, is enjoying an advantage by breaking the law. And that's true also of immigrant labor that is imported into this country. So for example, with bipartisan support, I offered to the immigration bill, which again was passed bipartisan basis now in the House, an amendment that basically says if you recruit someone from abroad, you can't retaliate against them by, in effect, causing them to be deported when they complain about substandard working conditions or broken promises in the recruitment of that labor coming into this country. I saw a lot of this problem when I was a state prosecutor, attorney general for 20 years, and I saw it from the standpoint of what happens in our foster care system, what happens in local places of business. The foster care, which is where Rob left off, the foster care system and our state systems often put children in jeopardy, put them at risk. 300,000 children in this country, a staggering number, are at risk in our foster care systems. Why is that? Because because our foster families are not always what they should be. And we need to make sure that they are not put at risk with the best of intentions on the part of the family as well as the system. And so this problem has a human dimension here at home. And the reason for this caucus was to focus bipartisan attention on this problem. Prevention, protection, prosecution. We need to prevent the problem, we need to protect the victims. And, you know, as Ron said, I'm a prosecutor. Sometimes I still think like a prosecutor. We need to provide more effective federal penalties, which is, again, where his leadership has been so important, through our domestic system as well as abroad. I would just finish with this point because I know, and I really do apologize for being late. I know that you have other agenda items. If you see and meet some of the people who have been victims, who have had to treat themselves, who have now become advocates, you really see this problem in a completely different light. You see the sufferings, but also the potential for transformative change. If we can save people, rescue them, protect them, and then prosecute the wrongdoers, this issue can be effectively addressed. But it will take awareness and it will take action at every level, because this problem has tentacles that reach into sex trafficking, labor exploitation, all kinds of different aspects of both domestic and foreign affairs.
Marilyn, I don't want to make a quick point, but let me just say this. We're going to take a couple of questions from the audience because we're very conscious of your schedules and very appreciative of your coming here today to join us. Marilyn, you had a
I just want to say how thrilled I am about this, the potential legislation. And for the people in the audience, the several states, but really not a majority, have something called safe harbor laws, which is really essentially what you're looking to do across the nation, and which would be so valuable. In the meantime, you can go home and look at your laws, and this is the law that does exactly what Senator Portman was speaking about, that protects children. What I'm interested in is what age you're going to use. In Minnesota, we advocated to get it 18 and under. We were successful 16 and under, and the girls, or it can be little boys, but it was primarily little girls who have been trafficked, then are not put into the justice system, but are put into rehab. But it's also a huge need for rehabilitation beds, because sometimes these young people are on drugs. They need, as you mentioned, they need, psychological support. So it's hard to put them even in your homeless shelters. Their issues are just so complex. So we need beds. We do need prosecution, and in order to do that, we need the laws, the safe harbor laws, so that it can protect the victim and then get at the perpetrators and the demand.
If I may also add, you need your activism at the federal level, but also, I know from having been at the State Department, we also worked extensively with the state legislators and in terms of state-by-state laws. Do we have questions? I think you had your hand. And introduce yourself. I think you're from Ohio, right?
My name is Bill Hilt, and I'm the president of the World Affairs Council of Northwest Ohio. We're a pretty new council, only been around a couple of years, and it's just a great honor to have you here to talk with us about this, to all of our panelists. I'm from the Toledo area, so we hear oftentimes what place we're in as far as human trafficking. We also have Tony Pacos, and we have Mud Hens, and I'm not sure about the fourth place. Could you say for sure that is not because enforcement is better or awareness is better in that area? Because especially since we've gotten the grants to do the programs and stuff, I've become much more aware of all that's going on for awareness of human trafficking in Northwest Ohio. And I've had law enforcement people sit on our panels, and I've listened to all that they've done, And I'm suspicious that maybe it's because in Northwest Ohio we're doing such a good job of picking up on these things that it kind of puts us into that bracket. So can you explain that number 4 in a way to clarify it?
Thank you.
First of all, I'm glad to have an Ohio booster in the room. And Bill, I think what's happened in Toledo, at least from my vantage point, is that some of these numbers came out that were really disturbing. And you're right, they were on prosecutions and rescues, and so it indicated activity. So if you're in one of these cities that's on the top 10 list, it may be the fact that you're actually doing more and there's more transparency about it. But I think Toledo, unfortunately, was in kind of I'm not sure an avenue, sort of a highway of trafficking. And I'm sure there's some folks in Detroit here who can tell us about some of the horror stories in Detroit too. And the community has really responded, as you know, in every way. When I first got involved in this, it was partly because of the data, partly because of the international issues that Paula talked about, but also partly because the school group in Toledo wanted me to do a video for them. And it was about the volunteer work that they were doing. It was a parochial school, different than anything now. And so I did this video because I couldn't show up at an event where they were trying to encourage more kids to get involved in this effort. And that sort of piqued my interest. So I think what's happened is, you're right, the community has really gotten engaged. There's a state representative there who's taking the lead in the legislature. There's a strong support from the law enforcement community. Mayor Bell, who just lost his re-election. He was very, very engaged. I'm sure your future mayor will be. And so that's really neat to see you involved, the World Affairs Council and the business community and so on, because it's going to take every part of the community to be engaged and involved. Sort of the eyes and ears of the community, but also, you don't have law enforcement, educators, the media, obviously families and social service agencies, so working together. It's very hard to solve it because it's sort of pernicious, it's in the shadows, people don't notice it. So I don't know what our ranking is now. What is it, Megan? Toledo's ranking.
Well, that was in 2009, but that is, you're correct for arrests and prosecutions, and that's something that should be highlighted as positive.
Yeah. So I think in some respects these rankings are kind of silly because maybe they indicate more activity than they do anything else, but it did help raise some awareness early on and frankly got people engaged. That's good.
Actually, I'll say from an international perspective, it's good there's some rankings because we always get the question from the State Department, well, what is the U.S. rank on this issue? Because we report on and evaluate other countries, so that's valuable in knowing. Did I see one of our young scholars back there? No? Did any of you? All right, then, yes, please. You look like a young scholar.
Hi, I'm Bhavani
And would you mind taking the mic? And
Yes.
thank you for introducing yourself.
I'm Bhavani Parpia. I'm an educator from the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I'm here with the DFW World Affairs Council, the best. I have a question. The United States, Somalia, and Sudan are the only 3 countries in the world that did not ratify the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. Could you comment on that, please?
That's a tough question, so Richard's going to have. I don't know, is that going to include that? I don't know.
We are both, we were both there about 2.5 years ago. I don't think it has come up while we've been there, at least so far as I'm aware. I certainly am, generally in favor of the principles that it embodies, and I can't answer your question about why it hasn't ratified. I certainly will.
I'm going to, well, I was going to say, I don't know if in this administration, the State Department has forwarded it. That's part of the process. It has to be forwarded through the executive branch for consideration by the Senate. But a quick 30-second, because we know we have to get you back. Just finally, obstacles, what are your core obstacles? And again, thinking about the audience here, how can we help you in this effort?
Let me make a pitch for a measure that incorporates many human trafficking protection, which I think has a chance of package the immigration reform bill. Talked about numbers and statistics. I'll be very blunt. There are no reliable numbers. There are no accurate statistics on this problem. There's an estimate by one of the international human rights organizations that 20 million people are in modern-day slavery around the world. Even in this country, I gave you a statistic, 300,000 children at risk. If I had to swear, I couldn't swear to it because right now, the FBI does not report these numbers as part of their major crimes. If I joined with Senator Portman, who's on the Judiciary Committee, which had authority over the immigration bill to offer an amendment that forces more reliable tracking of this problem in the United States. The more support you can give us on immigration reform, the more protections there will be against human trafficking. That's a very specific ask. Generally, I know how well-informed and activist the World Affairs Council is in Connecticut, certainly, and around the country. I hear from many of you, which is great. If you have ideas for what we can do about this problem, but domestically in your community, again, informing people that there are 12 and 13-year-old children who are virtually forced into lives of modern-day slavery because of circumstances they had no control over. Disruption of their family lives. So measures that will help our families stay together, strengthening parents and what they do. This is a very broad request, but that's an area where I think your activism is going to be very important.
It's a superb request. Senator?
Yeah, Richard's absolutely right. On the data, this legislation talked about earlier, the Child Sex Trafficking Act is called the Child Sex Trafficking Data Act. I just looked it up on other things because one of the things it would require is the welfare entities as well as law enforcement would have to provide data that is not currently available so that we can begin to get a better grasp of the problem and target resources more efficiently. So the lack of data is an important hurdle right now to answer the question about what's keeping us from making progress. We need better data, better information flow. Many of you are involved in your local communities, some of your state governments, I'm sure, helping us to get that data, providing it to our states and local communities and the federal government to the extent we can be more helpful through this legislation we're trying to enact. That's really important. But mostly it's just, if I could make a very specific request, contact your member of Congress, contact your 2 senators, and just say, hey, this is an issue of human dignity we care about a lot because we're so busy. You know, Richard and I are pulled every which way. And sometimes it's not a matter of members not being interested, they just aren't educated. They just don't know about it. And they don't know that you care. And a lot of people, again, they think human trafficking is Africa or maybe Asia. They don't realize it goes on, not that that's something we shouldn't be engaged in, we should. That's probably how most of us got involved and we're at the World Affairs Council. But it's also in their backyards and they should know about it and they should know you're interested. So that would be very helpful. And to Marilyn, Paula, thank you for letting us come today.
Yeah, thank you.
Richard, as you heard, has got great background in this because he is a former AG prosecutor, and that gives us real credibility, I think, in the caucus. We go to somebody with his experience. I love working with him. If we could get more members of the caucus, that would be one specific ask. And then if you're interested in this legislation, maybe we'll provide it, if that's okay, through you, Paul, to the World Affairs Council, and we'd love to have it up in the legislature as well.
Thank you, we would love that. Senators, Marilyn, you're our heroes and heroine. Thank